Game development is hard. You can't just slap a bunch of art and code together and expect a AAA game to be produced. No, there are months, if not years, of tedious little nuances that you slowly have to whittle away at. So know that when I make this video, it isn't to be mean-spirited, but to offer critique of a franchise that features developers way more talented than I could ever muster. Animal Crossing is a game where you do things you can do in real life, but choose not to. You can fish, catch bugs, and talk with people when there isn't a global dumpster fire occurring. The series has been going on for a little over 20 years now, and the most interesting part of each game being so similar to each other is that it feels like every new entry builds and improves onto itself. It slowly chips away at that marble sculpture, making it more detailed and refined as time progresses. But as that happens, things inevitably get cut. You could honestly make an entirely new piece of work out of the discards that the refinement process makes. Where am I going with this? I have no idea, but what I'm trying to communicate is that there is a lot that New Horizons doesn't have. And as they try to smooth it out and create a cohesive experience, it lost that innovative and experimental edge that the previous games had. Don't get me wrong, it still brought a lot of new ideas to the table, but with this entry, those ideas sacrificed a lot of nuance that the game had. This game had amazing potential to be the best Animal Crossing game in the series, but I genuinely think that it's one of the weaker entries. Maybe not creatively, I mean I've seen what people can make, but just for general fun. I think the game still has potential, but I wouldn't hold my breath until we get Animal Crossing Newer Horizons before this reinvented formula gets off the ground. But when that happens, there are a bunch of features from previous games that I would love to see make a comeback in either this entry or the next, so that each play session stops feeling like a weird Bill Murray Groundhog Day type scenario. Before I begin, I just want to give a big shout out to Chewy Plays and JVGS Jeff. They've made videos that kind of have a similar premise to this one, and I think you should really check them out. Alright, enough with the filler, let's get to what I think should come back from previous Animal Crossing games. Animal Crossing population growing for the GameCube and Nintendo 64 had a lot of weird jank and experimental ideas that I think deserve to be in newer entries. For the sake of length, each entry in this list is going to have a maximum of 10 points, the first point being Lighthouse Duty. New Horizons surprisingly lacks an actual lighthouse. Sure, you can place a furniture object, but there isn't really a utility to placing it, which is strange because if you have a coast then you kinda need a lighthouse. In population growing, the town's mayor Tortimer can go on vacation during the months of January and February, and for 1 week he will task you with turning on the lighthouse each and every night, and for doing so you would get a reward. Considering that Tortimer is now absent in the series, I could easily see Nook needing assistance, as pulling that big and heavy switch can't be good for your back. For number 2, we have Gracie's car. In addition to Lighthouse Duty, another job that I'd love to see make a comeback is something akin to Gracie's car. By having more responsibilities and tasks that require the player to check in every day, it would honestly breathe a lot of life back into this game. Now, there is obviously the question of how they would get a car onto the island, but how did they get a car into your village? For number 3, we have the balls. The balls were, well, balls that you could find around the map. Their only function was that you could kick them around, but it would be fun to have their physics be implemented into the ball furniture items, instead of just going... I would love it if you could just slap a ball on the ground and start kicking it around, just as long as it doesn't end up in the water. Snowballs are still in the game, but for the sake of variety, I think these guys coming back would be a lot of fun. For number 4, we have the villager count. For some reason, this entry still has the most villagers out of any other game, offering a whopping 15 little animal friends that you can live with. But from Wild World onward, this was dropped in favor of a more sizable 10. While 10 is a healthy minimum and maximum, I feel like the option to have 15 villagers should be there for those who want it. Maybe Nook and Isabelle could offer a slider that lets you choose how many people you want, and any additional land plots are removed or something, I don't know. It would just make having to pick our residents a lot easier. For number 5, we have the island. The island was a really cool feature that I could never use because my dad stole my Game Boy Advance. But if you did have a Game Boy Advance and a link cable, you could take advantage of it and visit the island, which featured not only an islander, but also a cottage away from home. And it's also apparently great for money-making potential and having 2 unique NES games. Speaking of which, number 6, the NES games. Population Growing had ROMs of NES games that you could play whenever you wanted to. This feature was sadly dropped immediately after, probably due to limited storage capacity for Wild World and the Virtual Console existing on the Wii, but Nintendo hasn't really been taking advantage of Virtual Consoles since the Switch era began, designating it to a weird free app that doesn't even have a library that compares to the Wii. New Leaf also had a bonus mode that was related to the Wii U and new Nintendo 3DS furniture items that allowed for smaller games related to Animal Crossing to be played, and honestly, I'm just asking for any variety at this point. And for number 7, we have the dump. The dump was a designated spot that allowed you to dump whatever you wanted into it and not have it mess up your town's rating. But what this area also allows for is villagers to dump items that they don't want into it, allowing for even more item rotation than just shops, random villager events, trees, or balloons. This feature would later be expanded into the recycling box and retail, both of which I want to get into later. But in the end, I really wish that we got to build a dump, not only for the item rotation of course, but also because we could see what our friends are throwing away. And not too late at number 8, we have the diary. The diary was a tool that let you write one specific note a month. Its successors were the notification board, which was also in the game, and the tree in New Leaf. But I always like it when games have a physical representation of how far you've come. Although, because we now have a bajillion different ways we can take notes efficiently now, I think the diary would definitely need to have a different use. Perhaps once a month it could take a picture of your island and then you can look back on it. Or maybe it would be like a calendar and keep track of important dates, or whatever. But if they tried, I really think that the diary could become a staple item in the Animal Crossing series. We're all fine at number 9, it's more dynamic world generation. The world generation for Population Growing was kind of all over the place. You could have ludicrously steep cliffs or weird bumps in the path, and in general it kind of seemed less reliant on the tiles and more vibrant and naturey than the other games in the series. I hope for future games in the series we eventually move away from the tile-based format, but I think having the weird oddities that Population Growing has would be a step in the right direction. And for number 10, we have the Raffle and Sale Day. Once a month you could participate in Tom Nook's raffle, which would net you a random item that you potentially couldn't have. Sale Day also serves a similar purpose, as on Black Friday you could buy grab bags that carry 3 items of random selection. Overall, the main complaint that I hear about New Horizons is that getting new items or DIY cards can be tricky in the later parts of the game when you have close to everything. I know that trading is a thing, but some people don't really have access to that, and what I feel New Horizons really desperately needs is a better item rotation system. That wraps up what I want in Population Growing, so now let's move on to Animal Crossing Wild World for the Nintendo DS. Animal Crossing Wild World originally started off as a port to Population Growing, but would later grow into its own game as more things were developed. As a result, a lot of features were carried over from the previous game, but there's also quite a bit that's new. Starting off with insurance. Insurance was a mechanic that intentionally screwed the player over. Lyle would essentially harass you until you bought into his program, and then when you got hurt, most likely from bees, you would be given bells for your quote-unquote injuries. The only issue was that the total amount that you could get paid back from said injuries would always be under what you initially paid, meaning no matter what, you could never get back what you paid into the insurance program. I really wish that there were more traps like this in future games. Sure, we have Crazy Red who enjoys selling us counterfeit art, but I think it really demonstrates how ruthless this universe can really be by having Lyle be so aggressive. And it gives this world a lot more depth that future games really need. Speaking of depth, next up we have meaner villagers. While they are softer in this game than they are in Population Growing, I remember villagers still having a bit of edge to them when it came to Wild World. One memory I have in particular is when I went into Blaire's house and she asked me what I thought of her house. I was amazed by some of the items she had, so I said great. And she then went on a huge tangent about how I was only saying that to make her feel better, and then she sent me a letter the next day calling me an inconsiderate doofus. Or something along the lines, it was a decade ago. But I have found screenshots from the DS era that mirror the rudeness of Population Growing villagers. I think a common complaint that a lot of people have about New Horizons is that the villagers feel kinda sterile, especially when compared to the older entries. And I kinda wish that they were a little bit rude with us if we weren't on good terms with them, instead of just the usual either super nice or passive aggressive. And I know that's only 2 items, but we're already gonna be moving on to Animal Crossing City Folk. Animal Crossing City Folk had a lot of features and ideas that were brought over from Wild World, and as a result, not much was cut from that game. So keeping that in mind, a lot of features that were cut in this game were first introduced in Wild World, placing them on this spot of the list. Starting off with constellations. The constellations were a feature first introduced in Wild World that was also ported to City Folk. Strangely enough, this was cut in New Leaf despite that game having touchscreen support, but what this system allowed you to do was to make a mark on the night sky by allowing you to make your own constellation. I admit, it's kind of a useless feature, but it was one that I had a lot of fun just fooling around with and added a lot of characterization to your town. And it was especially neat when you paired it up with number 2, the UFO. Up in the night sky with all of your custom-made constellations, you would have a chance to come across a UFO. If you had your slingshot out and shot it down, the next day you would come across a grisly wreckage of Gulliver's UFO. By giving him his spaceship parts back, you can send him happily back on his way home, and in return he'll give you an item from a supposedly far-off land in the stars. This feature is technically an expansion on one in Wild World, where you could shoot Pete down while he was delivering mail. While Gulliver does return in later entries, I wish the slingshot had more practical uses than just shooting down the balloons in New Horizons. The only other use that I can really think of is if there was maybe bigger pieces of shrubbery you could shoot fruit down off of, or maybe villagers would have a beehive be developed on their house and they'll ask you to shoot it down. Overall, I think they could develop the slingshot further and actually make it a tool that makes sense to be in our arsenal, instead of just something that we lug around because maybe there'll be a balloon. Up next on our list is the city. The city was a really cool part of City Folk. While most people don't really like it due to how long it took to get there and back, I think it was a really interesting set piece that gave us a lot more buildings than Animal Crossing usually offers. Gracie shop with a credit card, the marquee, the HHA, Crazy Red's alleyway shop, the auction house, fortune shop, Shampoodle, Kix, Phineas, and the Reset Surveillance Center. While some of these locations would later return to the main street in New Leaf, I really like the different atmosphere that going to the city provided. While the city would go against everything that Animal Crossing New Horizons is trying to accomplish thematically, I could easily see a small island resort bringing in big name faces like Gracie and entertainers like Dr. Shrunk and KK Slider, or even have features from Tortimer's Island make a comeback, but more on that later. Up next on the list is red turnips. Red turnips are a form of turnip that you could grow yourself. They were a farming item that rewarded you the more time you put into them. You could buy red turnips from Joan for 1,000 bells and they required constant care and attention, otherwise they would just shrivel up and die. You can water them for a minimum of 4 days to make a 1,000 bell profit, or hold out for 7 days to make a 15,000 bell profit. This idea is similar to the pumpkin growing mechanic brought in on the Halloween update. However, it lacks the risk and reward system that red turnips have, as even if you forget to water them, you'll get at least 1 pumpkin. And to follow this up, next up we have the recycling bin. While the box technically is in New Horizons, its features are not as robust as how it worked in City Folk and Wild World. Within the box, gyroids, clothing, and furniture would appear every once in a while and you could scoop them out. In addition to this, the player was also able to store items in said box, allowing for a very unreliable means of storage and a way for players to see what exactly you're throwing out. And every Monday and Thursday, the box is emptied, allowing for more items to come in. New Horizons brings back this concept, but nerfs it significantly. Now it's related to Gulliver's side quest, which is annoying to do, and while you still do get furniture and clothing items, its selection is limited. However, the box can now contain saplings and wallpaper, and you still get your usual trash. You can technically place items in the box, however, it's mostly tied to the co-op multiplayer mode. What I'm saying is, I want the box to be emptied like a recycling box should be, and for us to place stuff we don't want into the box, and for our friends to later dig it out if they so want to. I do really like, however, that it seems to be tied to certain events happening on your island. Up next, we have the fountain. The fountain is a feature that was related to the donations mechanic, which we'll get into next. If you donated 400,000 bells to the town fund, a fountain would be built in front of your bus stop. What makes this one special compared to the ones found in future games, however, is the denizen that lives within it, Serena. If the player were to throw their axe into the fountain, Serena would be summoned and ask about the type of axe that was thrown in. According to the wiki, the results of the answers are completely random, but you have a chance to be bestowed a silver or golden axe. That is, if she's in a good mood. If you catch her at a bad time, she'll either give back your regular axe or straight up keep it for herself. The scene is a reference to an ancient Greek story known as the Honest Woodsman, where a woodcutter accidentally drops his axe into a river and the god Hermes goes to retrieve it. Upon reaching the surface, he brings a solid gold axe, a silver axe, and the woodsman's axe, and asks the woodsman which of the axes were his. The woodsman answered honestly, and impressed by his honesty, Hermes let the woodsman keep all 3 axes. I absolutely love it when the series references ancient mythology, or has really cool features that you could easily miss. Speaking of which, the donations. Another part of the post office, the players had the option to either donate to a poor, desolate town known as the Boondocks for Wild World, or donate to the town fund in City Folk. Donating to the town fund allowed for expansions to your town to be added, such as a new bridge, a fountain, and a lighthouse or windmill, and donating to the Boondocks would give your character a random feather in the mail, and eventually it would be upgraded to the Boonopolis. While I understand why the town funds were cut as later the public works projects would take their place, I feel like a concept like the Boondocks really adds a lot of character to the Animal Crossing universe. But certain lines from the cranky villagers imply that political corruption is a very real problem in the world of Animal Crossing. Speaking of political corruption, Animal Crossing New Leaf. Animal Crossing New Leaf is probably the biggest leap in the series. It retained a lot of the old features while also progressing in a logical direction. Now, jumping from merit to dictatorship was a reasonable move for the leap onwards, but honestly, there was so much here that I wish was in New Horizons that sadly had to be cut. Starting off with the Main Street. Main Street is everything that fans wanted out of the city. It's easily accessible while retaining a lot of the same locations. Why they decided to cut a setting like this, I could never understand, but during the shift from New Leaf to New Horizons, we lost the post office, an iconic part of Animal Crossing which is now absent from New Horizons. Pete, Phileas, and Pelly also no longer make an appearance, meaning that characters that have been around since population growing are now gone with no explanation. Who delivers the mail now? Do the Dodos do it because they have the card rack in the airport? Does Tom Nook personally do it? Who handles the mail? We also lost Nook Homes. Technically, Nook's home is the venture that led to the events of New Horizons, so the building wasn't really needed. In addition, Nook can provide some features that the location offered, but the Happy Home Academy also had a small booth in front where you could ask questions about your house. We'll get more into some of these later, but a part of me still wishes that this building was still in the game. Kix, LaBelle, Leaf, and Katrina also had their own store rather than just be wandering salespeople, and Luna had the Dream Suite. All of these features have been implemented in some way, but I think we're really missing out on is Club LOL. Club LOL is the main entertainment building and features world-renowned DJ KK Slider taking a spin on the turntables every night. He still performed his Saturday guitar playing nights, but I seriously wish that he still had his own venue in New Horizons. The fact you could also dance in it and he would occasionally play your town tune was also amazing, and it was honestly really cool to just bring your friends here and vibe for a while. Building on Nook's Homes, we now have home architecture. At Nook's Homes, you had the option to swap out your architecture for different designs. Doing so really let you spice up your home and give it a unique flair that matched your theme. Considering how customizable they wanted your island to be in New Horizons, it really doesn't make any sense that this was cut. In New Horizons, you can still change the colors and patterns to a certain extent, but nothing like what you could do with New Leaf. Strangely enough, it seems like villagers' houses can have slightly different architecture, so I'm not really sure why we can't do it ourselves. Following this up, public works projects and town ordinances. Public works projects were a really cool feature that was cut. While it does no longer cost over 30,000 bells to erect a hammock, there were some bigger projects that were cut out of the game. Bridges are still a thing and ramps were added, but buildings such as the Reset Center, the police station, and most importantly the Roost were all cut. The Roost in particular stings as you could work in it part-time to make some extra bells and learn more about your villagers and townsfolk. You could also remodel your train station and town hall using this feature, and although you could build a lighthouse, it also didn't have the same purpose like in population growing. I really don't understand why they cut so much from this. The buildings, the restyling of town objects, well, that's mostly it really, but it could have been so much more. It was a really great feature that was cut out before it had the chance to truly blossom, just like the town ordinances. Why did they cut this? Listen, if we already took the plunge of upgrading our mayor status to a dictatorship, I don't understand why town ordinances were cut. While 99% of people did go with the keep your town beautiful one unless you wanted to be like my mom and spend 4 hours a day watering your flowers, I think that they could have easily been modified so that certain ones cancel each other out. Who knows, maybe if you keep your town beautiful, Bell Bloom can't be in effect, and obviously Night Owl and Early Bird cancel each other out, but this was another feature that really needed expanding on that they ended up cutting. Keep Your Town Beautiful was kind of added to New Horizons as just being the status quo, having flowers never wilt under any circumstance, but I still wish we got the feature to play with our town's rules a little bit more. Off the top of my head, I could see rules such as the Island Loyalty Program or Island Freebirds Program, allowing whether or not villagers stay or immediately leave without asking you, but I was really disappointed by hearing that this feature was cut. just like the store upgrades. Store upgrades were one of the most important features of Animal Crossing before they were severely nerfed in New Horizons. Having your store slowly become more and more suave and polished was such a satisfying feeling that they cut for no apparent reason. Minus how much your town can develop and grow in New Horizons, I would honestly call that and the upgrades to Main Street the most substantial feeling of progression that Animal Crossing has to offer. The fact that it seems to be absent is a huge bummer because now there is less for you to work towards. I don't understand why they even cut this in the first place. Another disappointing thing is Harv's purpose. Harv actually did things in New Leaf. Sure, most of the time you see him, he's drinking a cup of coffee and probably stoned out of his mind, but he operated the campground and presumably the Meow Coupon service that would later get a knockoff known as Nook Miles. He also operated the RV service, which allowed you to essentially summon anyone you want to it. The fact that they just made Harvey a negligent photographer in New Horizons kind of sucks when he was a slightly less negligent dude with a purpose in the previous games. Plus his waifu Harriet was cut. Another part of the RV service that was cut was the Zelda villagers. Zelda and Splatoon had a crossover event that came with the Welcome Amiibo update and introduced villagers like Epona, Ganon, Inkwell, Medley, and Wolflink. These were all villagers that was exclusive to this version of the game, but I wish that they became parts of the main series. I get why they aren't, as it raises some questions about the already strange Zelda timeline. I mean, come on, they look really precious. And now for the big one. Tortimer Island minigames. Tortimer Island was this neat little place you can visit, with the only denizens being him and a family of 4. Now, why is the island called Tortimer Island when there is a family of Kappas already there with an established culture? I have no clue, but what I do know is that the minigames are fun. Now, some of these minigames are just expansions to what you can already do, just with a competitive spin. Balloon hunting, bug catching, diving, fishing, gardening, fossil finding, and ore hunting. But there are other minigames that let you do activities that you wouldn't be able to do during normal gameplay. Going through a labyrinth, bopping a lawnmower, matching items, hide and seek, and scavenger hunts. Now, some of these minigames were expanded to activities that villagers could ask you to do unprompted, but the competitive and multiplayer aspect of it has yet to come back in New Horizons. Playing these games with friends was an absolute blast, and considering that I haven't seen anyone since February 2020, I would really appreciate having these minigames in-game. Another feature that I really want back is retail. Retail is like the expansion to the idea of the recycling bin and the dump. Now our lovable alpacas, Cyrus and Reese handle the recycling options and also handle customization. Not only that, but it was your town's budget swap shop, where you and your villagers could put up items you no longer need and sell them for however much you want. I know I keep going on and on and on about item rotation, but it's seriously something that needs to be improved with Animal Crossing New Horizons, and I think retail would solve a lot of people's problems with this game. Next up, we have villager visits and requests. Villagers in New Leaf had way more that they wanted you to do than in New Horizons. While they can still lose items, request a specific bug or fish, or have you make a delivery, in New Leaf villagers could request public works projects, bury time capsules, sign a petition, ask for fruit, and ask for furniture. However, the most interesting requests you could get were the visit requests. Villagers could request you to either go to their home, visit your home, or for you to bring someone to their house. Sometimes they'll have you do this immediately, or other times they'll supposedly be too busy and ask you to do it at a certain time and make an appointment. This feature really incentivized me to get back to playing the game, and I remember getting super excited whenever I had an upcoming visit. While villagers will still visit each other and you can visit unprompted, not only will they never enter your house, but they also never ask you to visit them, which honestly makes me super sad. And to wrap things up, the Happy Home Showcase is easily the feature I missed the most from New Leaf right next to the island. Being able to street pass complete strangers and see their house designs was always an absolute joy and was a great way to expand your item catalog. Considering that Street Pass is now a dead feature, I could see it being implemented in a pseudo-RNG style, where every time you wrap up a session, your house is uploaded to the cloud, and in return you get a random selection of houses you can visit, and perhaps you could also get the houses of friends and strangers you play with online. This feature honestly gave New Leaf a real sense of community with it, and made me feel way less alone in my game, even when there wasn't a physical presence of players. And you thought we would be done there, but there is another game I'd like to talk about. Animal Crossing Happy Home Designer. A somewhat forgotten part of the series, Happy Home Designer is honestly one of my favorites for providing a feel-good environment and letting you just sit back and design some houses. While there isn't much depth to it, there are aspects to it that I would love to see in future games, such as the public facilities. In Happy Home Designer, you got public facilities that you could completely model to your liking, with a school, hospital, restaurant, shop, cafe, bigger shop, office, department store, music hall, and a hotel. While including these in the base game would start to make the series feel like a city development simulator, I honestly think that's where I personally want the game to be heading. I think being able to build these buildings and customize their interiors would allow people to build the towns of their dreams, and is definitely a feature I want to see being included in New Horizons. Maybe not a school or office, but I think the amount of people making their own music venues or shops or hotels kind of show that this is something that people want. Up next, we have the unique building sounds. This one's really simple, but while building, you could give your building a unique ambience to it that would really change the mood. It's simple, but having small changes like this can really add to the atmosphere of houses. Just like being able to change doors and windows. Please, Reggie, all I'm saying is that for the next Animal Crossing game, we have the option to add doors wherever we want, or add or remove windows to our liking, and customize the heck out of those curtains. In addition, I wish we got the ability to customize villager homes. Being able to design and build houses was honestly a really fun part of this game, and while being able to change it at any time wouldn't be too interesting, I think being given customization jobs to our villagers would really shake things up. The Sims 3 had the architecture designer career, which essentially let you spice up your neighbors' houses for better and for worse. And I think a similar system where you're given the chance to customize houses would really be a great addition to the game. Up next, we have room layouts. In Happy Home Designer, you could customize the floor plan of any building. There is so many different variations of rooms that you can play around with, and I seriously hope that for the next entry of the series, we get to choose where we want our additions. In addition, I wish that villagers would also upgrade their houses to a certain extent. That would mean designing houses around the idea, but like I said earlier, a sense of progression is really important, and having my villagers join me on my journey to build my town is always great. Now we have Digby and Lottie. Digby and Lottie are adorable. Lottie is well known for being the one amiibo that people don't want to pick up, but I think that her and Digby were pretty adorable parts of Happy Home Designer. However, I kinda wish that the Happy Home Academy had more of a place in New Horizons. Maybe in the current framework they could have Happy Home Fairs, or maybe if they brought back the city you could visit the Academy. I just sorta miss that place. And finally, for the last feature that was cut from Happy Home Designer, I want the gyroids to come back. Gyroids are pretty cool because they go and and Nintendo removed them. Why? And for the last game on our list, Animal Crossing Amiibo Festival. That's right, we're talking about this. This game is understandably despised by anyone who has a sense of quality, but there is one feature that I think should be implemented into future entries, even if it's better left forgotten. The mini-games. Technically, I'm just using this spot to talk about New Leaf more, but the Island Escape mode was genuinely a fun part of New Leaf and offered rewards for completing its challenges. It honestly wasn't a half-bad board game either, reminding me of the Forbidden Island and Desert games. I think other mini-games like Rossetti Bob could offer a lot of variety and more importantly, more things to do with your friends if they added co-op, just as long as they remove the cards. Wow, that was a lot to get through. But New Horizons is a great game by all means, but to be honest, I really feel like they shot themselves in the foot by having the game take place on a remote island. And having so many iconic features of the series be dropped due to its theming is disappointing to say the least. And overall, it left me missing a lot from previous games. People have been banking on the 2.0 update to really breathe new life into this game, but it's honestly become so daunting to jump back into it, even with all the things they've done differently in this entry. I love the fact that you can place your villagers home. I love the fact they talk with you before moving out. I love the overall laid-back feeling that this entry had to offer, but like I said earlier, when you boil it all down, there isn't a lot of depth or edge in this entry that really makes it stand out. For New Horizons 2, I hope that they go a little bit back towards the series' roots while retaining a lot of the quality of life improvements. Hopefully breakable tools don't come back as well. Thank you for watching this video. This was the first time developing a strictly opinion-based video, and to be honest, I had a lot of fun making it, as long as it was. If you want more of this kind of content, then the best feedback you can give me is letting me know down in the comments, and considering that I have the reading level of a chipmunk, feel free to correct me on anything I get wrong. I also used a lot of clips from other YouTubers in this video, as currently I lack a proper capture card for AV inputs, so we're gonna move on to the credits. You can also get the links down in the description, but without further ado, here we go. Wow, I'm actually surprised that you made it all the way to the end. This video took roughly a month to make. I think I spent 2 weeks doing all the audio and 1 week doing all the visual work. It was definitely a lot to get through, but it was a really good learning experience, and I'd like to make content like this in the future if that's interesting enough. So if that's something you're interested in, make sure you like and subscribe, as I'm really trying to grow this channel. But thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you have a really good day.